Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.
Hello, good morning, Pastor.
Hey, good morning, Daniel. How are you?
I am well. Oh, your voice is coming through very loud and clear this morning.
Yes, he's about to
That
get
doesn't happen all the time.
Not this clear.
He's about to get very defensive to try and justify all the males that he has attacked this morning by saying they're not intelligent.
I don't think it was an attack.
Stephen?
Yes, Pastor.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, Pastor. How are you?
Oh my God.
Stephen, I'm all right. Who did I attack this morning,
No
Stephen?
one.
Basically, I saw a message there saying all these men are idiots and unintelligent, and only women are smart.
Lie on Pastor.
Yes. Of course I'm going to lie on Pastor.
It is his choice of words, Daniel, but I told Stephen to check brain mapping. Executive functioning in brain. The brain is quite an interesting area of study, and if you do psychology, you study psychology, part and parcel of that, you've got to do a little bit of messing around with brain studies. I don't understand a whole lot of it, but I know I've read enough to see brain mapping and understand a little bit of brain functioning to know that a woman's brain functions differently from a man's brain, and particularly doing given specific tasks. What lights up area of activity, thermal imaging, you might be familiar with that, thermal imaging of the brain. Just don't take my word for it. Just do read and see what happens in a woman's brain as compared to what happens in a man's brain. The woman occupies the whole house,
The
Stephen.
question is, does anything happen in a man's brain?
Oh,
does
come
anything
on,
light up past in our brains?
Who's the one insulting men now?
Exactly.
Well, I'm
You
one,
have
so
some
I can
explaining
insult
to do.
myself, so it's okay. I'm one of them.
All I was saying is that people are, you're quick to dismiss that when we say things, I've said it very often, even in my sermons and all of that, that a woman functioning is much more complex, and she can handle complex operations with far greater ease than a man can. In fact, in marriage counseling, I often refer people to a book written by Pam and Bill Farrell. Men are like waffles and women are like spaghetti. Meaning that men can, like waffles are neat little squares. I'm OCD that way I can deal with one thing at a time.
Correct.
Don't move me across the diagonal to 12 different squares. I will move from square to square to square, like on a waffle. A woman now is like spaghetti. Very interrelated. Everything is mixed up together, but it comes out tasting good.
That's right.
The only difference that I would have with Pastor, right, is I know why we are like that. Pastor will refuse to accept that's the why we are like that.
Oh boy.
So we'll leave it alone for now.
But
No, I know what you're going to be, in what you call inherent instinctive natural drive of man, but we leave it alone for now.
Yeah, let's leave that alone.
Pastor, do you think that makes women intimidating to men?
Women are very intimidating to men, frankly, and that is part and parcel of the domestic issue. Not really with the pedophilia and stuff, but the abuse of women, because men, given this machoism, really do see the adept female as a threat to their male power. And female create for men a feeling of powerlessness, because most female have a particular prowess, though they might not have degrees behind their name. Generally, even so, in our society, we know that women are more educated than men in terms of formal education. Every year, GHS, for example, will always do better than Boys Grammar School, my alma mater, on the CXC. So even if you just check on academic subjects, women are always going to be the higher achievers. In most relationships, the women are smarter than the men, just on book, on paper. Women have more social grace than men. They are very adept in social situations, generally. In situations of conflict, Stephen, they're able to articulate their thoughts. They can just say how they feel, get it out there, and a man has all of that pent up in him, but he's not as articulate. So women are powerful and I just quickly give you 3 counts on which women are more powerful than men. And therefore, but one area that man is more powerful than woman is this kind of physical power, I suppose. So when women have the power of education and the power of her social grace and the power to articulate, and she's using that in confrontation with a man, guess what power the man has, Stephen?
Yeah, physical, which is why he gets frustrated and hits out. Lashes out.
Yes, exactly. So that's part and parcel of the reason. And you asked the question,
well
I thought
said.
I just
Well said.
give that answer.
So, Pastor, why is it then? I mean, I in my limited understanding of politics and so on, right? We see very few women involved because, and then when women do get involved, they're so far superior to the men in terms of how they handle things on the political side, but yet because they're far too sensible to get involved in politics.
That's a very deep question, but Steve, you asked it because I think you know the answer already. The good old boy syndrome and the boys network are very protective of this institution.
Yes.
And the type of names, once a woman breaks the glass ceiling or attempts to break the glass ceiling, it's quite the institutions are already stacked against women. Stephen, let me tell you something about women and the view of women, which has been morphing over time. But you ask a question that is not unrelated to how men are treating women today. It has come down in our social scripting. Women have a place that is given to us by our social scripting. In fact, even in the way the laws have been developed, Stephen, I think you know this. I know you have done law. I don't know the field of expertise there, but you should know that a lot of the laws actually treated women also as property.
Yes, correct. Danny and I were talking about that earlier.
Even in the
seems
matter
to me
of
when
rape.
you marry a woman almost becomes your slave.
Yeah, but even in the matter of rape, rape was not considered the kind of crime of a person against person. Rape and the laws of rape were considered like a property crime.
Right.
So if you raped a woman who was married to a man or a man's daughter or something, it was as if you were breaking into his house or slamming his car or something. It was treated as a property crime. And so these are, it is deeper than you know and realize. You say things, well, why are women involved in politics? Because the social scripting that we have been given have relegated women really to property. Now, within the last 60 years, and a lot of things came out of the civil rights movement, a lot of attendant riders got on board with that, women's right, also the LGBTQ and other things have been, other people have been clamoring for rights, even the disenfranchised, disabled. Everybody now is beginning to challenge the status quo, challenge the establishment, and rethinking the social scripting that has been handed down to them. So this elevation, this new push of women to get into the realm and the arena that was formerly male, you are fighting against 1900 years and over 1900 years of shaping and framing. So it is not going to happen overnight, Stephen, because you are pushing back against the backload of 1900 years of shaping and history and relegation and scripting. And the whole thing has got, but they've made good strides, to be honest with you, within the past recent years. You look around the world, you look around the world at various countries where the prime minister is the top boss. Germany and other places, New Zealand and other places, where the top
Barbados.
There you go. Why would I not come closer home, right?
Exactly, bring it to home. And when you look at how she speaks and what she says and the kind of thing, she is way above any other prime minister in this region from what I've seen.
Well, so that again. And the way you ask me these questions, I tend to want to not give the superficial answer, but to really understand that these things are rooted deep within history. A lot of what we're experiencing and spinning off and our day-to-day lives basically are rooted within history and within culture, and they are still moored or still tied. And so to unleash what's happening with children or to unleash what's happening with women or in politics and all of that, we've got to basically cut the ties to what they have been tied to traditionally, historically, in terms of our norms and operation. And we got to live with what happens when we do that.
Pastor, do you think that the Bible, or as Stephen would say, the good book, has a role to play in how women are viewed? especially as it relates to wives.
Pastor, since I want to go on a little bit beyond that too, because I wanted to address Danny's question. But the other interesting thing, it has long been argued that one of Jesus's most trusted disciples was actually a female. And when you look at the portrait of Leonel da Vinci, there's an argument that one of those, you've heard that, I'm sure, Pastor, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead, please, with Danny's. Clear.
Which one you want me to answer?
No, let's do with Danny's first. Danny's is more interesting.
That red herring
Danny's is more interesting.
People are going to be following that red herring rather than following the substance of the matter. But Daniel, the Bible is very, very pro-woman, against a machoistic culture. A culture of the patriarch being a male, and that is understood. The Bible is also accurately reflecting the customs and culture of the time, where
That's
the
correct.
male patriarch is the head, and
yes.
a lot of rules that were not necessarily biblical but societal. And the men of the Bible came out of society in which this patriarchal system was well entrenched, where men had multiple women and this all of that. The Bible is not necessarily an endorsement.
Just kidding.
Right, the Bible is not an endorsement of this. The Bible is really just saying this is what is obtaining. But when you look now at the way God deals with and what God prescribes, for example, many of the leading men in the Bible reflect this patriarchal attitude, the male, the boss, the head, whatever, because that comes out of their culture. But when you look at the mandates of God and the kind of equality, in fact, the very first statement in the Bible about man-woman relationship is actually a statement that in Greek, etsakanizo, which means help that is equal or meet. And when God made man, I want you all to get this, when God made man in that account, then he said, it's not good for man to be alone. I'm going to make this etsakanizo. I'm going to make this person. And the term that is used is help meet. Of course, people and male culture have warped that, and it has become help mate, as if a woman is a helpmate to a man. But in the original Greek, in the Hebrew that was translated into Greek, it was actually a help meet, meaning a help that is suitable. Meet mean equal, and that word meet, God establishes in that very first narrative about man-woman that a woman is meet with a man, which means that she's not above or below, but she meets, meaning equal. So the biblical view of woman has always been that she is equal to a man. I can do multiple scriptures, the Pantata scripture, the Galatians 3:28 scripture that says all are equal, multiple things. And the Bible actually is a revolutionary book in the way it pushes against the culture of the day. Now, get me and get me well. The culture of the day is reflected in the Bible, where there is male dominance, patriarchy, and patriarchal system. That is there. The Bible reflects that, but the Bible does not endorse it. The Bible actually pushes women to the very forefront of this struggle against male dominance and the patriarchs running the thing, and elevates women in a way that must have been an affront to the culture of the day. People like Lydia, who is mentioned in the Bible as a businesswoman, she's a multinational businesswoman going from place to place with deliveries, with outlets, with subsidiaries and all of that. All of that is in the Bible. And it shows that a woman she has multiple homes, multiple business establishment, and against the backdrop of male dominance, the Bible highlights this woman as an example. There are many examples like that. So to answer your question, Daniel, the Bible actually elevates the position of women and speaks in many ways to not taking advantage of them, but that they're equal with men. To answer Stephen's red herring, Stephen mentioned, Stephen, I really like engaging you because we believe different things about the Bible, but in terms of his authenticity, veracity, but we can talk. Da Vinci's painting, which is not biblical, it is just a painting, so let's begin there. It is just a painting that reflects his beliefs and his understanding.
Da Vinci was a good Christian fella. He clearly was spoken to by God, and he
well,
was
the Sistine, I mean, all of his look. one particular faith has utilized his work
correct.
very well, and
Yes.
it's good. I mean, but the painters of the day reflect the culture of the day. For example, our modern painters today reflect their understanding, their creativity, their culture in today's norms and their today's setting. The painting is basically a reflection of the inner man, and Da Vinci painted what he wanted to paint.
Right.
Now, in that painting of Da Vinci, actually, there's what people call the portrayal of a female disciple, but in that kind of culture, he had to cover it up and make it look like male.
Yes.
And that's just like all paintings are subject to interpretation. The alternate interpretation of that, which is far more acceptable, is the sense that one of the disciples of Jesus was a youngster. Probably with effeminate looking. What is effeminate?
Yes.
He hasn't grown into that
Right.
rough cultured
Yes.
cut of Peter, for example, the fisherman. This was the disciple whose name was John. And in the book of John, as John wrote his chronicle, he was always the one who was closest to Jesus.
I thought
Leading
Mary
up
was the one
Jesus.
closest to Jesus.
What was that?
I thought Mary was the closest to Jesus.
Yeah, but John claims in his book that he was the closest to Jesus.
Okay.
Mary never claimed that, but John claimed that he was the closest to Jesus. He claimed he was the first disciple to the tomb when Jesus, was, which is an historical fact, by the way, that there was a Jesus. Stephen, there actually was.
No, but I'm not disputing that at all. What I find interesting is there all the books, as you correctly said, Pastor, right? I am not. Are there any books in the Bible that are written by a female? Is there an apostle? Is there any like that?
There are books that are written by female. They're not in the canonized Bible.
Right, exactly, correct.
Which
that's what I was getting at.
You have to understand that
That's
the
what I was getting
canonization
at.
was done by men.
Correct.
Okay, under
Correct.
the guidance of God.
Yes.
The canonization means a canon means book, and to bring all of these letters and writings and documents into one book.
Yes.
There was a ton of them out there, and Stephen, you probably helping our nation by asking that question, so they understand how books got into the Bible. And the Alexandria Council, first of all, in 70 BC, and then subsequent to that, other processes of canonization vetted, very, very heavily vetted the books as such that the 69 that are in the 66 that are in the traditional Bible, and then the Apocrypha, which would be the apocryphal books, other writings, make it into some versions of the Bible. But that does not mean or ignore the fact that there are many other very inspirational quality writings out there by men and by women that for what reason or the other did not make it into the very, very strict canon. So yes, Stephen, there are writings out there, but in the selection process, it didn't make it into the canon. Some might even assume that some of the books that are in the canon under male name and male penship are basically there because a pseudonym for the push of a woman who had, is basically carries the stamp of a woman, but is under the name of a man.
Pastor, I want to get this question in for someone on WhatsApp, okay?
Okay.
This person is saying, I have a question. The Bible says that wives should submit to their husbands, which I think I understand. But should a husband demand anything, let's say sex, for example, because women are sometimes just not in the mood?
Good question. Very good question. Doc, let me see you. Let me see how you handle this one.
What's the question? Should men demand anything of women? I don't get what's the question. Ask me.
Should men demand anything, let's say sex, for example, because sometimes women are just not in the mood?
Women are just not
in the mood. They don't feel like it.
A woman's body is a woman's body. The Bible does not give man the right to have the woman as property to be used. So let me make that very, very clear.
Okay.
And the Bible actually allows for the woman to withdraw herself from the man for a season. That's 1 Corinthians and chapter 7. So these are things that are dealt with in the Bible. I want to make it because I do so much marriage counseling, and I do make it explicitly clear because I will not have my church be complicit in this era of male dominance where somehow we, through religion, bequeath unto the man a right that is not biblical, a right to own the woman and to demand sex at any time. That's not allowed for in the Bible. It is by mutual consent. And I am one of those pastors that says, anytime a man, whether he's married to the woman or not married to the woman, one, he demands sex, and if she says no, then he thinks that, well, I will take it anyway because I'm married to you. I am saying that is rape, and it is not legal, and I don't understand how we can think that any court of law, whether you are married or unmarried, any court of law will uphold any rights you have to say, well, I'm married to you, so I'm entitled to rape you at any time.
Yeah.
This church does not stand and endorse that kind of thinking. So whoever asks that question, the man and the woman should engage in healthy sexual intercourse. However, a man does not have a right to demand and take sex from a woman who does not give consent.
So, Pastor, what you're basically saying here is,
Yes.
should Danny ever think about getting married, she really needs to bring the person she's going to marry before you, so you could explain the rules in
She has a
advance.
very good father who,
okay.
friend of mine, who she, Daniel, I hope you have a good relationship there with
Yes.
him, because he's a good
Of
fellow.
course.
I would endorse that and encourage you to listen to him. He
very
offers
good.
very, very wise counsel.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, we have to help her, Pastor. It's part of our duty,
Yeah, but
She's at that
and
age now where she may be thinking of doing these sorts of things, so we need to
She
provide
seems to me that
guidance.
she has her head on and all of
Yes,
that,
yes,
and
yes.
she has.
He's right.
She
Stephen
never
is trying
needs
to
me
help.
to give any supplemental. I know she gets good counsel, can get good counsel.
I counsel her very often, frequently, Pastor. I try my best, but
He said
sometimes
good
it's very
counsel.
difficult. Oh, okay, sorry. I withdraw my comment.
But on the issue, one thing I'm going to include in here.
Yes, we do have to
Because
wrap
it's
up.
been quite an engaging time this morning. But one thing that I'm there need two things, because yesterday you asked me a question and I did not answer very well. So let me.
What question was that?
You asked me something about the victims. I think that was the word you used in these sexual matters. That they feel like they're the ones who are ostracized.
Yes,
after they
I
have
did
been.
ask you that. Yes.
And this has been part and parcel of our societal, and I don't know that I have the answer, because again, it is part of our societal script, how we view these things. There is inbred in us, shaped in us by our history, our culture, our norms, our mores. There's something shaped in us that when a woman comes out and says, listen, this has happened to me, first of all, there is disbelief, right? We don't believe, this man, he could not have done that. You're making it up. Or you like I heard yesterday, I was disgusted when you read the comment that someone said that, well, them young girls, it blame them. They're the ones who throw in themselves.
Yep.
So not only do we disbelieve that it happened, but we discredit them
Yes.
and make them basically a skettle. That's we see.
Yep.
That's basically saying
Yep.
you throw yourself around, so take what you got.
Yep.
And because of that, we dismiss and don't treat. So when you combine the disbelief, the discrediting, and the dismissal, do you expect women are going to come forward when they're going to get the dirty end of the stick,
Well
as
said.
if they're the one committing the wrong?
Well
So
said.
that was your question yesterday, Daniel. And then to Stephen's earlier contribution this morning, which follows up really. I don't know if he heard what I said yesterday towards the end, but it follows up on a particular sticky matter. Why is it that this thing continues to happen again and again and again? And what will be a deterrent to some extent, though deterrence is not my preferred option. Prevention is always my preferred option, rather than punishment and consequence as
Agreed
deterrent.
100%, Pastor.
Right? But even so, punishment and consequence have their place, and some people are able to go about and do these things without much punishment and consequence. And the question is why?
Yes.
And yesterday I ended by saying it's a question of power. And until, and I will say it again and again, until we switch this imbalance of power, where currently, what I said yesterday, the men and perpetrators are often the ones, predominantly the ones with the power,
Yep.
the position power, the money power, the brute power, political power, influential power, connection power. I listed all of these. And when you examine all of these cases, The men are the one with power. And therefore, punishment and the consequence will continually be curbed by the power equation and the power balance. And if you want to see punishment and consequence, you've got to change the power equation and power balance. And that we have to have this kind of discussion, but we're out of time. Maybe sometime down the road I will talk about ways in which we can change the power balance.
Absolutely.
Right?
Thank you so much,
Pastor, thank you. That was a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Good to engage
Very
you, Stephen.
refreshing.
Good to
We're
chat
still
with you,
waiting
my
for
friend.
that debate that we talked so much
I
about.
suspect it's not going to happen. I don't know. We see.
I
Well,
really
well,
would like
Ben
you
is coming
guys
back
to
next
do
week,
it.
so we'll talk about it.
You said you weren't
You
going to
keep
say
saying
when.
Bing is coming back, Stephen.
Bing
We're
says,
waiting.
listen,
You said you
Bing
weren't
is
gonna
an
say
honor,
when.
as we all know in this radio station, Bing is an honorable, decent man of his word, and he says he's coming back next week, so he's coming back next week.
Man
Bing,
Let's
of
I
have a
got
good
your
day.
back, buddy.
Janelle, have a good day. Stephen,
care,
have a
Pastor.
good
Great
day.
day,
Stephen,
Pastor.
Grenadines, have a beautiful Thursday.
Take care,
Alright,
brothers.
Okay, bye.
Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.